Hey folks, so today I thought we would do some garden tours. It's pretty early spring. I mean, it's almost May, but you'd be surprised. There's just things that are just starting to get in bud. And it's usually a time when it's not like the most aesthetically pleasing as far as garden tours go, but I figured we would do it anyway because I actually think it's the most interesting. Now's the time when I could see what things are weeds in the garden, what things I would want to pull, what things are actually growing. Sometimes I'm like, what is that? Because they start up so early and so small, and you're like, I can't remember what I planted there. But I figured we would do this into 3 parts. So we do this Meadow House area because we've sufficiently planted it thus far and we have a lot of plans for this area. And then we would do kind of the interstitial meadow area, and then we'd give you a tour kind of the upper gardens, more perfunctory level tours, just so you could see what's growing at this stage of the game. So we're filming this in late April, probably run this in early May. And typically, like when spring happens, all of a sudden you have nothing, and then boom, like a week later you have everything. So let's start with the Meadow House. First thing I will say is that we just measured, this is about 1/8 of an acre, this whole grassy area. You'll see that I actually planted some anemones in here that have come up nicely. I think these are the Grecian windflowers, and so they've come up with like whites and kind of purplish blues. And we don't like this grass. I have to say, I probably even shouldn't have planted these in here because I got to this stage where I'm like, I'd love to actually take up all this grass. You could see that there's quite a bit of thistle in here. So I started marking some of these with flags. It's just pernicious. This grass grows up so high. It's been, just maintaining it is a bummer. And so I had it in my mind where I'm like, what if this whole thing was garden? What if we took out all the grass? And that's kind of like a master plan that I have, but I don't think we're gonna get around to it today. Or today. We're not gonna get around to it this year. And then we did plant some trees in here, and you can see that I just kind of slapped, there's no pretty tree rings or anything like that. I just kind of slapped cardboard on top just to prevent some of this grass coming in.
Well, that didn't work.
I didn't do it to be super effective over the whole time. What I did was just to suppress weeds for that season so that I could come back to this later. So what I did is I actually bought these really nice metal tree rings. So one of my projects this year is to actually go in, cut, really nicely around the grass and start creating these shapes.
What's that made of?
Just like steel.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, or like actually I think it's aluminum. And so they're like aluminum tree rings because if we are to take up all of this grass, then at least I could start with shapes, like shapes around the trees, shapes to incorporate the trees into gardens. And ideally, I would turn this all into a gravel garden. That's what I have in my mind, but I don't know if we could actually do that. And I think we'd have to start slowly. We could start working on shapes throughout, and I'd work probably with Sonder just to kind of figure out where the paths should be back here. You can see this thistle right here. I just like put an orange flag in it. Like these are things that I'm gonna have to come in and maybe deal with so they don't get too large. And then you'll see over here, last year I decided to plant some alliums. So these are the big globe masters. Those are the ones that get like an allium head that is the size of a bowling ball. And then I also planted some, oh, what's that? That's some alarm. Tell me to take my...
Tell me to talk about the next
Yeah, no, my mail-in ballot. This is Clematis. So this kind of grassy leaf that's coming up. And I didn't really think of a master plan for this area, but I wanted to plant some allium and Clematis here where it was just like kind of in the ditch. And I think this could be a really good start for a planting palette. And I have a planting palette that's in mind, but I won't share with you right now because it's still marinating. But then also you'll notice the big change here is that we used to have an old fence and gate here, and it was pretty ugly looking and is pretty ineffective at keeping out the deer. So what I'll share with you is that we've had quite a bit of deer browse this year, more than any other year that we've been here when we've been maintaining the fence. And this whole fence was down, but even prior to that, we kept on having these deer enter into some of the weak parts of our fence. So we know we have to tackle it this year if we want to actually save the plants that we have. So
yeah, we have a lot of welded wire fence.
yes.
And it's 6 feet. And what we need to do is we just need to switch to this fixed knot or woven wire for the entire fence.
Right.
Because right now, they just eventually pick and choose a spot and they'll bust through it or crawl underneath.
Belly crawl.
But if we
belly
have
flop.
this is so thick, you cannot bend it. You can't really, like you would never be able to get through that or crawl underneath. So
yeah,
that would
and
fix a lot.
it's pretty taut as well, because what happens with some of the other wire fence that we have is that it gets pretty weak and they could just belly crawl under it or like jump over the top. But this is now 8 feet. It was 6 feet, and you need about 8 feet in order to prevent deer to mostly come over. But what this affords us is it actually allowed us to clean out some of this area. Not entirely, you could see some of this pernicious grass still here. But this is a bank. This is an embankment that leads to basically where water drains off from, you know, the land. And I think I want to do a bank planting, and with things that spread really nicely. A lot of our native plants that spread really nicely that are also deer resistant. So I'm thinking like Pachyra, Monarda, maybe Pycnanthemum as well. So it could compete with the grass. Then this is a wisteria that had been planted here, and we had wooden posts initially, and this is where one of the wooden posts was, I think, or maybe not.
Yeah, the fence used to be there.
Yeah, the fence used to be here. We straightened out the fence now, so it's given us a little extra space. But we put back a wooden post here because wisteria, as you may know, could get really woody and really weigh down the arbor or the wall or the fence that it's on. So we wanted to basically train it onto this, which we have yet to do because we want to keep it off our main fence more or less. So that's why we kept the wooden post. But this gives us an opportunity to actually plant more on here, which is what I wanted to do, but I didn't want to do it on a fence that we knew was going to be taken away. Now this is going to be the more permanent fence. And so I have these white flags here where I'm going to start planting some vines, and that gives us some privacy. So I think that will be a separate episode. I have to decide what vines I'm going to put up, but I'm going to go probably for native vines that, again, will just give a little bit of privacy from the road. We are benefited from the fact that the road is lower down, so we're kind of higher up, and that helps prevent any kind of like traffic sounds as well, which is really nice. We got some of our birdhouses up, and Saunders in renovation mode, not only for our house, but also the birdhouses, and you'll see that we have predator guards up now, and he also put slate roofs, and we've had some tree swallows checking out this box. Some of our plants here, this is a cercis. This is one of the weeping cercises, the eastern redbuds. You could see that they are just starting, which is funny because, you know, just south of here, and we were in also zone 7, we were in the Carolinas, and all the eastern redbuds were in bloom like 4 weeks ago. So we're really far behind with these because these aren't going to be probably blooming for another 2 weeks or so. So it's still chilly here. And then we have some, this actually got eaten a little bit. Down here you'll see, this is deer browse. So this metal thing blew over and they ate the tips of this, you could see. So this is what it would look like. They'd have these buds here. And this is one of our native amelanchiers. I actually planted this amelanchier, which is serviceberry, and the serviceberries are all blooming right now in our forest. then this one is another serviceberry. This is Nantuckenensis. I have 2 of these, and these are ones that are rare, or I don't know if they're even like endangered in New York, but I have these in like little cages so they don't get eaten, just in case a deer has an incursion in here.
Yeah, this is what our current fence is made of.
Yes.
The majority of it.
And we
you can see how
recycle
weak
these.
it is. You could just bend this easily.
Yeah.
So what they do is just break through.
But it's perfect for these.
It's great for these.
Yeah, for these little tree circles. So, but you can see this grass is just intense. We're gonna have to mow it soon. And so what I'd like to do is actually do proper tree circles. And once I have those tree circles in this area, I could start to see what shapes start to emerge. We have this beautiful, I think this is called green sword, but it's it'll kind of grow very tall and slender. So I think that'll be very stately here. This is a vitex. Now this dies back down to the roots. So unless you have a pretty warm winter. So this is Vitex Angus castus, and it's a wonderful herb for women in particular. So not native to the area, but gets really beautiful flower spikes, purple flower spikes. And I had first seen this at our tour at Hortus Botanicus. And I was like, wow, the bees were just all over it. Now they're in a slightly warmer zone. We're in zone 5, 6 here. They're in, I think, zone 7. So the zone 7 folks, I feel like they could grow everything. So this one doesn't usually die back for them in the winter. So it's more of a Mediterranean plant. This one got a lot of deer browse, unfortunately. So you can see here, this is what deer browse looks like. They just bite off the buds. You can see it here too, and there. But we still have some buds. This is our Cheonanthus virginiana. This is our native fringe tree. Really beautiful tree. It may be susceptible to the ash borer because it's in that same family. We'll have to see, but because this is more of a multi-stem, I don't know if the ash borer will be attracted to this, so I figured let's just give it a shot. Why not?
Now will that come back, or will it always stay deer browsed? And
It'll be deer browse, but basically you'll get the buds right here.
Oh, we'll just start budding right
below
it. Yeah,
right below it. It's like you're pinching off the tops. So here we have one of our maples coming in. So it's starting to flower, you could see. Well, the flowers, I guess, are a little past their prime. And then this is a non-native viburnum. This is also coming in. I really love the leaves and the flowers here. Leaves are almost like this kind of rugose metallic. This cultivar is named Allegheny. And then pots, this is a lot of lavender was planted in here, and that will probably come back. I might have to do a little bit of, you could see I actually did some cutting back. This is the Muhlenbergia. So a lot of this stuff is a little later in the season. So I know a lot of folks will plant annuals. In here I might supplement with some annuals, or I might actually intersperse with some bulbs, which I did here. So you could see that this was a project that we planted last year. Sonder will never forgive me because I didn't put the liner in.
No weed fabric
no
between
weed
the stone and the
So
dirt. So that means that eventually the dirt will make its way through the stones into our foundation
I totally
area.
forgot. He put a lot of gravel in here. There's sufficient amount of gravel. I put a lot of woody material here, so it's probably preventing a lot of the soil from coming through right now. But once that woody material starts to degrade, what Sonder is saying is that some of the soil might actually, when I'm watering it, might come through down here.
Well, you let me know,
affect
even with the
foundation.
rain, you let me know. I'm curious if anyone knows what happens, because I think at some point the soil will just make its way through the gaps in the stone, and then it will be really close up against our foundation of the house.
Right.
Which is not ideal to have a bunch of soil sitting there, because then it can hold water and then start acting like freeze and thaw cycles against the house.
Totally not ideal. So we
might have to pull it up.
We talked about pulling all this up. All of these are perennials, but this is starting to come up really nicely. You could see that we have the chipmunk is hiding. I'm sure I'm going to have some big sunflowers and peanut plants growing up in here. So what I'll probably end up doing is coming through here and just getting our raised bed mix and kind of patching in some of the places.
That will last a day.
It'll last a day, but I'm gonna do it anyway. One of the things is that, like, you know, a lot of that material is nice and fluffy anyway, and it starts to sink. You'll start to see that in some of the gardens that I'll show you. Some of the plant roots will have popped up because they'll have either popped up from maybe the winter, or I think more likely is just the soil starts to settle, because all these gardens that we've been putting in really didn't exist here before, and so it starts to settle over like the years. But a lot of stuff has come up here. Here's a rose. Now this is a climbing rose, and I'm gonna have to train it up. You can see there's parts that need to be cut back. I haven't gotten around to that, but I'll do that. Some of these bulbs early on, I have some videos that I'll throw up there of some of the earlier bulbs. You could see some of the ones that are just kind of fading right now. And the erythroniums are coming up. You could see some are just starting. We had some tulips, and we started to put some of our bee houses. This we put out a little too late, I think, but for next year.
Yeah, and I discovered one day when you're gone, a raccoon had taken that thing apart and spread it out all over this garden.
Well, he was probably hoping for something, but there wasn't anything nice in there. And then this is our Clematis. So this is the one that you're giving me flack for. You're like, it looks dead. We planted it really late in the season, but
it still kind of looks dead.
It still kind of looks dead. It's really bizarre.
I can't believe
it's just like
it's flowering from these little stems.
I know. It's like the little. It's pretty woody, I guess. I can't remember the cultivar. Maybe Miss Bateman, but it's going to be a white one, and I think it's twice blooming. Not twice blooming. I think it just blooms for a good period of time, which is what I wanted to do. But these are really good at gripping onto. I mean, you could get bush clematis, but like this one is a vining one, and it doesn't get too high, because what I wanted to do is not have something that starts to grow up onto the top of the roof.
Okay, so how big was it when you planted it?
Oh, it was probably at these little
So it
nubs.
grew this much already this year?
Yes.
How much will it grow?
I think it only gets to about 6 feet.
In 1 year?
In 1 year.
And then what do you do after that in order to prevent it from
You could cut
getting
it
out of
back.
control?
You could cut it
So
back.
you could keep cutting it back every year, and then it will do the same thing, crawl back up?
Yeah.
Or you leave it and let it go a little further, maybe?
No, I think you normally cut back your clematis.
Okay.
But not your, like my bush clematis, I have some up there that, you know, just kind of stays pretty compact. I was debating whether I should actually plant that in here, but all this stuff has started to take off. I wanted to have blooms pretty much from April through November, and I think that's what this is going to give us, but we'll just have to come back to the months and see what pops up. Now this, I had a grass that I ended up taking out, one of our native grasses. You can see some of our dandelions have taken up residence here. I'll probably end up taking this out and planting it elsewhere. I just planted it here because there was nowhere else to plant it when I took it out of one of the gardens. And this doesn't look like much as our Verbena Bampton. And it's so beautiful, and it gets to be this airy, floral, rounded mound of really tiny, airy purple flowers.
Is this it, or is there something coming out of the ground?
You basically cut it back, so the roots are in there, and my hope is that it will come back, but it doesn't bloom until a little later. So I have to figure out whether, you know, I want to make these pots look like something. I did buy these pots. These are like Witchford pottery. These are really beautiful. It's a family owned and operated handmade pottery. They're a little expensive, and they're so pretty. I mean, look at that little, kind of reminds me of our white-breasted nuthatches, but I don't think that's what the bird is. But I'm going to actually plant some of my succulents in here, so it's not actually going to be any of our traditional outdoor plants. So those are what I bought for that. Now this is our original bed that we had basically freed. I don't know if you remember that episode, if you had tuned in. This is like the weedy bed episode. This was so weedy. You could see actually some of these weeds. We never really put cardboard under here, so you could see this is kind of what it looked like. This tree was cracked in the middle. I had to do some major pruning on this pinus right here, and we basically just freed up this bed from a ton of barberry. We took all that out because we noticed that the barberry was encroaching in our forest. These are eyeliner lilies. These are so beautiful. But last year, they got decapitated, I think, from the deer. And then we found out that we had lily leaf beetle. And lily leaf beetle is a little red beetle that basically covers itself, its larvae covers itself in its own excrement. So it's like this slimy, slug-like thing. And it just basically decimates lilies, both the native and non-native lilies. So as much as I love this lily, and it says eyeliner lily, so it's this kind of creamy white with this brown eyeliner around the edge as if it was just like drawn in by a crayon, a very fine crayon or very fine pencil point. It's just, I don't know if we're gonna actually get many this year. Now this kind of mess right here, I could probably come in and take out all these stems. This is our native verbena, but it's a cultivar called Homestead Purple, and it is a spreader. And this is the type of stuff that I would want in this bed because it's so huge. And you can see how many dandelion have moved in here. I generally would come in here and spend a half a day to take the dandelion out because I'm waiting for the sprobolus, which is this grass. You can see it's starting to come up here. So I want this grass to kind of fill out, but it just takes sprobolus a very long time to kind of get started. And this verbena, I am just so shocked at how it spreads. So word to the wise, if you're planning on planting that, if you don't want something that spreads, then don't plant that. If you want something that spreads really quickly throughout, then plant that. This is the other verbena I was talking about. I'd cut this back earlier in the year. So this is that Bampton, and I'll show you images of that. It's just so glorious when it really actually starts to flower. And yeah, otherwise the stems get pretty high, round and mound. This got deer browsed a little bit, but it's a birch. It's pretty resilient. And the way that this is structured, it wasn't probably easy for the deer to eat everything. So you could see that the leaves and the catkins are coming in. Fothergillas also got eaten too, so a lot of them got clipped. So who knows if they'll flower this year or what, but they're still kind of hanging in. Typically, this is our quercifolia. This is snowflake. I had just planted this, so this just actually came in. So it looks a little weak, but it should take off. But those are a deer favorite, so hopefully we won't have any deer in here. And then we have some of our native physocarpus. This stuff is amazing. When it actually flowers, I think this is one of the best floral resources for our pollinators here. Pollinators absolutely just love it. And I can't remember what this is, to be honest with you. Not even sure what I planted there. And this is kind of a low mounding syringa. It's a lilac. So we ended up going up to Coldwater Pond Nursery, which we've done a tour of. Highly recommend those tours because he does a really cool operation up there. And this is a nice lilac because you love the smell of them and you're like, let's get more of those. And I was like, okay, let's do that. You can easily talk me into that. So that's what's happening over here. And then just from the front, this will probably be another episode down the line, but I had to stand back. We started putting some of our furniture out. We haven't put out all our furniture, but I kind of wanted, like, the back of the porch has more of that limestone color and a little less of the terracotta. And I kind of wanted to bring some of the terracotta color back there and some of the limestone here. And I was debating whether I should have like a hanging planter here, but then I saw these and I already have one of these and I was like, that's actually a really great way to bring in some of that limestone color and bring in that door color. And we'll plant some perennials in there or maybe some annuals. I don't know what we'll plant right away, but that will have some sprays of color. And then the plants in the back are going to be coming back a little later in the season, or I might actually pop them out, plant them elsewhere, and do some spring bloomers in there. So I think that's what the plan is for the Meadow House. As you can see, there's like a lot that needs to be done here. I'm really looking forward to potentially taking up some of that lawn. We'd love to do a rock garden on the other side of it. I didn't even show you that side. It's just like super weedy. There's a lot of ragweed growing there. But I think that's probably going to be a 2025 project. We keep punting it down the road, but it's because there's like so much to do. But that was our Meadow House tour.
What's this behind you?
Well, this is going to be part of the Meadow tour, not the Meadow House tour.
Oh, wow.
To be continued.